Welcome to the Rare History Channel. Mahatma Gandhi, a complex legacy. Mahatma Gandhi, a figure synonymous with nonviolent resistance and the struggle for Indian independence, is revered globally. However, like many historic figures, his life was not without controversy. This video delves into 12 lesser-known, complex aspects of Gandhi's life, presenting a more nuanced picture of his legacy. Fact number 1. Gandhi's early racial views in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi's time in South Africa, 1893 to 1914, sheds light on the evolution of his views on race. Initially, Gandhi made several statements that suggested a belief in the superiority of Indians over black Africans. In his early petitions, he referred to Africans as Kafirs, a derogatory term, and argued for the separation of Indians from Africans. This period reflects a complex and lesser-known chapter in Gandhi's life, where his views were still developing and contrast starkly with his later stance on universal equality and non-discrimination. Number 2. Gandhi's controversial experiments with celibacy. Gandhi's approach to celibacy, especially in his later years, involved unconventional practices that have sparked considerable controversy. From the 1940s onwards, he began a series of celibacy tests, which included sleeping and bathing with young women, including his grandniece, without engaging in sexual acts. These actions, which Gandhi described as experiments to test his self-control, have been widely criticized as unethical and exploitative. The moral and psychological implications of these experiments continue to be a topic of intense debate and scrutiny. Number 3. Fasting as a political and ethical statement. Gandhi's use of fasting as a form of political protest was a defining aspect of his philosophy of nonviolent resistance. He undertook several fasts throughout his life, using them as a means to exert pressure on authorities or as a call for social reform. His fasts were not just political tools but also deeply spiritual acts. However, critics argue that these fasts often placed enormous emotional and moral pressure on his adversaries and the public, bordering on coercion. Gandhi's fasts, while demonstrating his commitment to his causes, raise complex ethical questions about the use of personal suffering as a form of political activism. Number 4. Gandhi's perspective on modern technology and industrialization. Mahatma Gandhi's views on modern technology and industrialization were deeply intertwined with his vision for India's future. He was critical of the Western model of industrial development, fearing it would lead to environmental degradation and moral decay. Gandhi advocated for a simpler, village-centered way of life, emphasizing traditional crafts and sustainable living practices. He championed the use of the spinning wheel as a symbol of self-reliance and resistance to British industrial goods. Critics, however, have argued that his vision was overly idealistic and impractical, failing to address the complexities of a rapidly modernizing world and the needs of a growing population. Number 5. The complexities of Gandhi's nonviolence. Gandhi's doctrine of nonviolence, or ahimsa, was central to his philosophy and political strategy, but it also presented challenges and drew criticism. His unwavering commitment to non-violence was put to the test during the turbulent period of India's partition in 1947, which was marked by unprecedented communal violence. Gandhi's insistence on peace and reconciliation, even in the face of escalating conflict, led some to question the practicality and effectiveness of his approach during times of intense social unrest. His calls for peace sometimes appeared out of touch with the brutal realities on the ground, highlighting the difficulties of applying nonviolent principles in situations of extreme conflict. Number 6. Gandhi's experimentation with diet and health. Gandhi's approach to diet was an extension of his ascetic lifestyle and his experiments with self-discipline. He adopted a minimalist diet, often restricting his intake to fruit, nuts, and a few simple dishes. He also experimented with fasting and used enemas regularly, believing them to be beneficial for health and purification. However, his dietary practices were often extreme and led to periods of ill health, raising concerns about the potential risks of such stringent regimes. Gandhi's experimentation with diet reflects his broader philosophy of simplicity and self-restraint, but also invites scrutiny over the balance between spiritual discipline and physical well-being. Number 7. Gandhi's tumultuous family dynamics. Mahatma Gandhi's familial relationships were marked by strife and sacrifice, deeply influenced by his philosophies and life choices. His wife, Kasturba Gandhi, bore the brunt of his experiments with truth and celibacy, often finding herself at odds with his ideals. Gandhi's adherence to asceticism and his intense focus on the struggle for India's independence often alienated him from his children. His familial relationships were strained as he placed the demands of his cause above the needs of his family, leading to a complex and sometimes troubled family life. Gandhi's devotion to his principles often meant that his family had to grapple with the consequences of his actions, both in his lifetime and in historical evaluations of his personal life. Number 8. Gandhi's controversial views during World War II. During World War II, Gandhi's stance was markedly controversial, especially his opposition to Britain's war efforts against Nazi Germany. His insistence on nonviolent resistance even in the face of Hitler's aggression was met with widespread criticism and disbelief. Gandhi's suggestion that the Jews should offer nonviolent resistance to the Nazis, and his reluctance to outright condemn Hitler, have been subjects of intense debate and criticism. This aspect of his philosophy revealed the challenges and limitations of applying nonviolence in the context of totalitarian aggression and genocidal regimes, raising questions about the applicability of his principles in all forms of conflict. Number 9. Gandhi and the Indian caste system. Gandhi's stance on the Indian caste system was complex and at times contradictory. While he advocated for the abolition of untouchability and worked towards the upliftment of the Dalit community, then referred to as Harijans, or Children of God, he also believed in the preservation of caste distinctions. Gandhi saw the caste system as a form of social organization, albeit one that needed reform. His vision of a caste system without discrimination and exploitation was seen by many, especially B.R. Ambedkar, a contemporary and leader of the Dalit movement, as insufficient in addressing the inherent inequalities and injustices of the system. Gandhi's views on caste have thus been a subject of much debate, as they juxtapose his larger ethos of equality and nonviolence against a backdrop of entrenched social hierarchies. Number 10. Gandhi's controversial views on birth control. Mahatma Gandhi's opposition to birth control and contraception stemmed from his deep-rooted beliefs in celibacy and the natural law of procreation. He viewed the use of contraceptives as morally and spiritually detrimental, advocating instead for self-restraint and celibacy as means of population control. This stance put him at odds with contemporary and later movements advocating for family planning as a means of empowering individuals, particularly women, and managing population growth. His views were criticized for being impractical and out of touch with the socio-economic realities, especially in the context of India's burgeoning population and the need for effective family planning methods. Number 11. Gandhi's controversial correspondence with Hitler. Gandhi's letters to Adolf Hitler, penned during the height of World War II, are a point of intense debate and criticism. Addressing Hitler as dear friend, Gandhi appealed for peace and nonviolence, a gesture that many viewed as naive given the brutality and aggression of the Nazi regime. These letters, written in 1939 and 1940, reflected Gandhi's unwavering commitment to nonviolence but also raised questions about his understanding of and approach to the fascist threat. His correspondence with one of history's most notorious dictators has been scrutinized for its seemingly gentle tone and the contentious decision to address Hitler with a semblance of respect, given the horrific context of the time. Number 12. Gandhi's response to the Bengal famine. The Bengal famine of 1943, which resulted in the death of millions, was a catastrophic event during the British Raj in India. Gandhi's response to this immense humanitarian crisis has been criticized for being passive and inadequate. While he expressed sorrow and sympathy for the victims, his focus remained on nonviolent resistance against British rule rather than active intervention or relief efforts in the famine-stricken areas. This approach was seen by some as a failure to address the urgent needs of the people and a misalignment of priorities in the face of a devastating famine. Gandhi's reaction to the Bengal famine thus remains a controversial aspect of his legacy, as it highlights the limitations and challenges of his philosophy in responding to large-scale human suffering.